Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, the Me Too movement reaches South Korea, resulting in at least one high-profile political resignation and allegations now being levelled at a number of high-profile figures from the entertainment industry through to the religious community and literary worlds. So with that in mind, can a social media campaign truly lead to substantive change? We'll be putting the question to Jacqueline van Stekelenburg, a specialist on protest movements. And also a spectacular rise for a Hindu woman, once a child slave and now the newest member of the Pakistani Senate. But we begin in South Korea, where recently the Me Too movement has snowballed. Earlier this month, a parliamentarian stepped down and abandoned ambitions to become Seoul's mayor. This after a woman accused him of sexual harassment. His resignation coming after the ruling Democratic Party was rocked by sexual assault allegations against An Hee-jung, a high-profile provincial governor who was seen as a serious contender in the next presidential elections. And it's not just the political sphere that's facing scrutiny, with other key male figures across many sectors of South Korean society also confronting similar accusations, as Yuka Roya reports.
You are not alone. That's the message from these women marching in central Seoul. Urging victims of sexual violence to raise their voices, the protesters called for meaningful action to tackle the problem.
People are becoming more vocal. Though some are still afraid to speak out, the atmosphere is very different from last year.
The protests came as a series of sexual abuse scandals involving powerful men rocked the country. The most high-profile among them was An Hee-jung, a provincial governor who was tipped as a top presidential candidate within the ruling party. He was forced to retire from politics after his former secretary accused him of rape.
I'm sorry. I have done wrong. In the days to come, I will faithfully comply with the investigation.
The government promised to strengthen laws against sexual assault and implement measures to reduce harassment. But since then, a member of parliament has quit over sexual misconduct. The scandals have also rocked South Korea's showbiz industry. A veteran actor hanged himself after being accused of raping his drama class students. And renowned film director Kim Ki-duk had the theatrical release of his latest movie suspended after multiple actresses came forward to say he had sexually abused them. The global Me Too movement has helped bring gender discrimination to the surface in South Korea's male-dominated society.
We're disappointed that powerful politicians are still oppressing women. We need to change the mindset of our society.
I hope education on feminism will start in our schools, so men and women will be more equal.
Some hope the campaign will also extend to women's position in the workplace. South Korea ranks 118th among 144 countries in the World Economic Forum's latest gender gap report.
And to protests of a more traditional kind, with scores of Tunisians holding a rally in the nation's capital to demand equal inheritance rights for both sexes. The nation's inheritance laws are based on Islamic principles, stipulating that men inherit double the amount received by women. Last year, the North African country's president said the nation's inheritance laws would be re-examined. However, his announcement sparked opposition from Muslim clerics, who said such a move amounted to a flagrant violation of Islamic traditions. So, are protests, be they either online or on the street as we saw there, capable of truly affecting change? Joining me now is Dutch academic Dr. Jacqueline van Stekelenburg, a specialist on protest movements. Thank you so much for being with us, Jacqueline. Some argue that the event of social media has resulted in protest marches that are founded more on outrage and anxiety than rather as a part of a larger, more effective movement as such. Would you agree?
No, I wouldn't. I think it's not an either-or question. What you see in general is that it's combined, and social media are a channel. It is like we had the newspapers or television years ago, and nowadays we have social media. Social media did change protest, however, But it's not that it's an either-or question.
So, but I mean, the problem with social media is that, for instance, when you look at what happened with the Arab Spring, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram was all very well and good to say to people, bring your bongo drums down to the local square at 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon and we'll protest against the government or the system. But there was no follow-through. And as a result, those protest movements were hijacked by other organisations that didn't necessarily reflect their values.
True. What we see, we did study how people were mobilized for the Tahrir Square in January 2011. And what we found out was that it was not only a Facebook revolution, as it was called those days. In fact, community organizations played a very, very important role in bringing people to the street. So in that sense, it was not only social movements or social media. And that is what we see very often. It's not either or, it's not black and white. And in terms of sustaining a movement, you're right. Social media are very good at bringing people to the streets as a mobilizing activism. On the other hand, they are also good at raising awareness. And that is what we need. For social change, we need social awareness. So in that sense, we see that social media play a large role. But social movements have an ebb and a flow. And to bring it from a flow to a flow, from high peaks, then you need also organizations, because there is not a resonance all the time. People are not mobilized time and time again for a long period. It's a critical mass which will bring the movement from an ebb to another ebb and to a flow and a peak. So what you see in general is that you need organizations, you need a critical mass, and not only social media to mobilize people time and time again.
So how do you ensure that a protest movement brings about true change?
I think that is the golden answer for a lot of activists. It's hard. What you need is, first of all, a very, very committed group of activists. So that's the critical mass who are willing and having the opportunity and are daring to take it for a long time. Because the type of action we're talking about, it's huge social change. It's not overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. So you need a long breath, and therefore you need resources, and therefore you need organizations.
It's not the first time that a social movement has led to change, is it? I mean, you only have to look at the anti-apartheid protests in the 1970s and 80s, or even the protests against the Vietnam War. There have been recent occurrences in history where social protest has led to policy change on the behalf of governments.
Yes, definitely. In fact, if you have a look at all the opportunities citizens have at hand to acquire social change, they can go to the voting booth, they can send a letter to a politician, or they can go into the streets. And then what you see, relatively speaking, the social movement activities are the most effective.
Finally, looking at the Me Too campaign, how do you see that playing out? And isn't it already having substantive change given the extraordinary cultural shifts we've seen, not in a matter of years, but in a matter of months?
Yes, I agree. I think it's been very, very successful in raising awareness, affecting the public and political agendas, and changing cultural norms over in a very short time. But do not forget, this movement did not start in October 2017. It already started in 2006. By Tamara Burke. And what we see is, with the whole conservative political populist right shift, we see that civil rights are eroding and under pressure. So there is like a solid ground in which the grievances surrounding, for instance, sexual violence, in which those grievances resonate. So what you see is nowadays those grievances are framed in terms of civil rights, and in 2006 they were framed in terms of social justice. So in that sense, you see, have a look at the women marches. The women marches just after the inauguration of Trump attracted more people on the streets than his inauguration. So in that sense, we see that it's a salient issue, and it's surrounded by a lot of civil rights issues at the moment.
Jacqueline, it's been wonderful speaking to you. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
And finally, here's a rather uplifting tale. As an untouchable Hindu child in Pakistan, Krishna Kumari was used as slave labour. But in what's been seen as a major breakthrough in the conservative, mainly Muslim country, the 39-year-old human rights activist has just been elected to the Pakistani Senate.
Growing up, Krishna Kumari Kohli worked on a farm as a bonded labourer. Now she's a senator, the first to hail from one of Pakistan's most marginalised communities.
For the first time in Pakistani history, a Dalit has been elected to the Senate. It feels like a dream.
The Dalits, or untouchables, are the lowest in the Hindu caste system. Life is even harsher for them in Pakistan, where minority Hindus already face discrimination and religious persecution. Kohli thanks her family for her success. Despite the difficulties, her peasant parents encouraged her to pursue higher education. Her husband, whom she married as a teenager, also supported her as she went on to obtain a university degree. She later got involved in activism. As a member of the secular Pakistan People's Party of the slain former PM Benazir Bhutto, she gave free legal aid to victims of sexual harassment. Now as a lawmaker, Kohli wants to continue speaking up for Pakistan's religious minorities and for women.
I would like to work on issues such as honor killings, forced conversions, and underage marriage, and other gender-related problems. There are laws already in place. I will work to ensure their implementation.
In the election, Kohli defeated a Taliban-linked cleric. She'll serve a 6-year term in the Senate, dominated by rich Muslim men.
And that's it for now, and you can connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. Thanks for your feedback so far. And yes, please keep those story ideas rolling in. So until our next show, bye for now.